The Tennis Gambling Podcast and the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Game Time, your home for the lowest price last minute tickets. Download the Game Time app today and use promo code SGPN for $20 off. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Sign up today using promo code SGPN, then go to sportsgamepodcast.com/dog to enter our bonus contest. 5 winners will receive shirts, hats, and a $50 SGPN gift card. We're also brought to you by Hall of Fame Bet, sports betting research platform for parlays, player props, and game lines. Download the Hall of Fame Bets app or visit HOPEBets.com. Use code SGPN to get 50% off your first month and start making smarter bets today. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is currently early Friday morning, roughly 2 a.m. Eastern Time on February 23rd. I'm your host, always, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun episode because we do have time to go through 6 matches. We have the semifinals in Doha as well as the quarterfinals in Rio. So we're going to cover all 6 of those matches. We're not going to talk about Los Cabos because the lines are not out yet, so we are not going to bother. A reminder, though, before we get into any of the actual recap of the previous episode and the overall matches from Thursday, I want to remind everybody to check out the podcast either on YouTube or on Spotify. And a reminder, if you are listening to the podcast on either one, you can check out the other. For example, we're not only on YouTube, we're also on Spotify or Apple. So don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Don't forget to rate and review on Spotify or Apple. On top of that, also a reminder, we have merch on the SGPN merch store for the tennis podcast. If you want to support the show, you can get a hat, you can get a nice mug, you can also get a nice shirt, for example. So check out the SGPN website for some Tennis Gambling Podcast merch if you want to support the show. Now, before we actually get into any of the recap, I do want to briefly I'll do it after, actually. Starting off with the Lock and Dog recap, ended up splitting. The last episode did have a loss with the lock. We had fees to win in straight sets at -116. Wasn't even close. Fonseca turned out to be a Brazilian sinner, and you ended up seeing fees get his ass kicked in that match. I believe he got bageled in the first set. So we faded the 17-year-old with pretty average at best challenger results, and that did not work out as fees got destroyed. However, did win the dog, though. Ended up winning with Ramos Vinola's money line at +127. We faded Varius, very competitive match, came down to the wire like I thought it would, but Ramos Vinolas eventually outlasted him as he won, I believe, 7-5 in the third. So nice winner there, basically broke even, is what it is. I'll look for a sweep here on Friday. Now, before we get into any of the actual recaps, I do want to do one brief rant. I haven't done a rant in a while, so I'm going to do a betting rant. I have a lot of bones to pick with all of the sports books out there because I need you to explain to me why you can't post the lines for all the tennis matches in, I'd say, an orderly fashion. Because I've been sitting here for the last 2-3 hours waiting for the real lines to get posted. That's why the episode came out so late. Now, I ended up getting lines for 2 of them. I had lines on both of the Doha matches. I had lines on the Cerundolo-Lajovic match and lines on the Baez-Montero match. Actually, no, I had lines on the Nori and Seabuth Wild match. Baez I didn't have a line on any of my local books. I found one online. So apparently in Europe they have lines available. So I borrowed the betting lines from there. I couldn't find anything on the Fonseca and Navoni match, and I don't know why. The match ended, the last match of the day. Fonseca ended up ending probably around like 8 p.m., maybe give or take. It was a straight set win against Garin, so it didn't take that long. It's 2 a.m. We still don't have lines on the match. Can you give us some damn lines? It's been basically 4 or 5 hours at this point, roughly 6. Can we get lines without having to wait like 6 hours? I just feel like it's not asking much. You know the matchups. You know that both guys, in this case, ended up winning in straight sets on Thursday. There's no injury. There's no real uncertainty involving the matchup at all. Can you just give us lines? So for the sake of this episode, I have lines on 5 of the 6. I got fed up. I couldn't keep waiting for the Fonseca-Navoni lines to get posted, so I ended up going ahead and recording anyway. But still, brief roast there. Give us some damn tennis lines on time instead of making us wait 5-6 hours to get them posted. I think it's ridiculous. That's my brief rant there. Now it's time to actually recap the matches from Thursday. I am going to include the actual matches from Los Cabos as well, because those matches ended up finishing. So starting off I'll go in order, starting with Doha. You had a pretty underwhelming day in Doha where you had 3 straight set wins and Khachanov won in 3 games. So Papiron ended up upsetting Bublik. That was a nice win there, 6-4, 6-4. You ended up seeing Khachanov beat Ruusuvuori in 3 games. Then Ruusuvuori decided, I'm done, and ended up retiring. You saw Mensik pull off a nice upset against Rublev. Mensik easily going to be a top 30 player in the future, as he's only 18 years old. And Monfils ended up beating Humbert in a pretty surprising upset based on the actual margin. He buried him 1-6-2, 6-4. So no drama at all. And you only had 3 matches out of 4 because Ruusuvuori got injured. So pretty underwhelming day in Doha. As for the outrights, end up having 1 outright left. We got Khachanov to get the job done. Unfortunately, Rublev and Humbert lost in the quarters. Is what it is. Hopefully, Khachanov can get it home for us. As for Rio, ended up seeing a pretty, once again, interesting or somewhat straightforward day because Lajovic beat Degir in straight sets. Seabolt Wild beat Munar, but that was a continuation from the match the day prior. So Seabolt Wild got the job done in 3. I believe that match got suspended midway through the second set, I think. So you ended up seeing Munar win the second, and Seabolt Wild won the third. Nori killed Barrios Vera 6-1, 6-1. Baez beat Diaz Acosta. The same exact story in Cordoba as he won 7-6, 6-3. Montero beat Alves in a Brazilian matchup in straight sets. And you saw Navoni beat Hanfman in brutal fashion, 6-1, 6-2. And you saw Fonseca get the job done against Garin as a slight betting underdog. So, couple of takeaways in Rio. I'm going to start off with the overall elephant in the room that I did not mention. Alcaraz got injured. So we'll start there. He got injured 2 points into the first match of the tournament, which is one of the worst case scenarios for the tournament organizers. No offense to the Brazilians who, of course, who are still in attendance rooting for Fonseca and rooting for Montero, for example. But I'm sure a lot of guys or a lot of people there paid a lot of money to watch Alcaraz, or at least that's why they ended up going to the event. And Alcaraz got hurt. It sucks. He's had a really rough year in 2024, really bad back half of 2023. Not fun for Alcaraz. I believe he ended up posting on Instagram that the injury is not serious. It is a mild sprain, which is good to hear. So we'll see if he's able to do the Netflix special, whatever you want to call it, against Nadal. Should be fine for the French Open, though, but he might be missing a couple of weeks. I believe he will be back for Indian Wells, I think. But we'll see how his rehab ends up progressing over the next couple of weeks. But it does seem like Alcaraz dodged a bullet, still got injured, and had to retire midway through the first set. But at least the injury does not appear to be long-term. Now, the other elephant in the room that I have to mention, which is really the emergence of a potential superstar in Brazil. I got to talk about Fonseca because Fonseca has been incredible. And I don't know why he struggled so much in challengers over the last couple of months. Now, he's only 17, so I am aware that youth could be a big reason for that. And you kind of thought, especially I did, that I just thought that he was going to be a little bit too immature to handle the moment against Fils in the first round. Was not the case, as once again, Fonseca has not dropped a set yet, ended up beating Fils in straight sets and beat Garin in straight sets. Kid's incredible. I got to start off there. The firepower that he possesses from the forehand side especially is otherworldly. It's in the same caliber as Alcaraz and Sinner. It's a crazy amount of power, especially for a 17-year-old. So Fonseca is a serious guy to watch moving forward, and I apologize to him. I was not familiar with his game, at least as much as I should have been, because damn, the firepower is undeniable, and I have to bring it up. So Fonseca, if he keeps progressing, this guy's a potential superstar. So we'll see what happens, but the power that he has is insane. And the fact that it's on clay and you can notice how great the power actually is, he's going to win a bunch of ATP tournaments if he ends up progressing the way that we think he might. The talent is undeniable. He's only 17. He has a very, very bright future. Let's put it that way. So I believe he's one of the youngest players to ever make an ATP quarterfinal. So we'll see how he does moving forward on Friday. But the point is I had to mention those two storylines in Rio. Alcaraz got injured, and you ended up seeing Fonseca really just have a coming out party where he looks like a potential, I'd say, serious threat over the next couple of years if he continues to progress. And maybe if the serve gets a little bit better and the consistency gets better, but he's only 17. So definitely wanted to mention that. Moving on to Los Cabos briefly, you had a pretty straightforward match for 3 of them, and you had absolute anarchy in one of them. So I'll save the anarchy one for last. Ruud beat Borges in straight sets. Ruud has looked fantastic. The court in Los Cabos is hardcore, technically very slow. Kind of reminds me of Medvedev arguing with the umpire in Indian Wells about how it's not actually hard court. He's a hard court expert, quote unquote. And that's kind of how I feel in Los Cabos. The court is very slow. A lot of breaks, a lot of long rallies, and Ruud has been phenomenal. Especially, we know how good he is on clays, especially in 250s. And Ruud has looked extremely comfortable as he ended up destroying Giron in the first round and beat Borges comfortably in the straight sets on Thursday. You had Tsitsipas beating Kovacevic in straight sets. Battle one-handed backhand. Tsitsipas is better, defending champion. Not a total shock there as he got the job done 7-6, 6-3. Zverev beat Kokkinakis. Kind of what I thought it would be on paper. Zverev's better. I'm not a big Kokkinakis guy. Props to him, though, for coming back against Draper in the first round. But Kokkinakis, I'm not a big fan of. I don't think he's that great of a player. And Zverev's more consistent as he got the job done and he won in straight sets. Then you had the craziest match of the day. You had two crazy matches, actually. One on the women's side and one on the men's side. So the question is, which collapse was worse? Was it Vondrousova, who was up 6-1, 5-2, 6-1, 5-2, and she lost the match, which is almost impossible, but she ended up doing so as Cirstea ended up coming back. I might have butchered the pronunciation. Apologies there. But Vondrousova 6-2, 5-1, and you lose the match. That's crazy. And you saw Mickelson, who had, I don't know if it was worse or not, but it's up there. So to go through Mickelson's collapse, he won the first set via bagel. In fact, he won the first 9 games of the match against Thompson. So he's up 6-0, 3-0. To go into the second set even further, he was also up 4-2, so he's still up a break in that case. Ended up having a 2 separate break points at 4-3, where he could have gone up 5-3. Ended up having 3 separate match points at 6-5 with Thompson serving, and he blew it. He blew the entire match. He ended up blowing the second set with the 3 match points. Ended up losing the breaker 7-1. Then went up a break immediately in the third set. Ended up going, serving it, trying to serve it out for the match as he tried to serve it at 5-4. Broken to love, then broken again at 5-6 and lost the match. So you can kind of choose whichever one you think is worse, but the Vondrousova one is an all-timer on paper. 6-2, 5-1. You lose the match. I believe she had 6 match points in that one. But the Mickelson one, damn, man. I mean, you're up. I mean, that's just awful. The fact that he even took a lead again in the third set with a break and choked it serving out for the match made it even worse. But 6-0, 3-0, and you lose the set, and then you lose the match, that's pretty bad too. So Thompson, props to him. Phenomenal comeback, tremendous resolve. And I got to mention it. That's an all-time choke job by Mickelson and an all-time choke job by Cirstea, by Vondrousova, I mean. And shout out to Thompson and Cirstea for coming back. So that was the main, I'd say, source of chaos for the actual slate. The rest was pretty straightforward. But the Mickelson collapse and the Vondrousova collapse were the 2 main storylines. And Rybakina getting injured and withdrawing with her match against Paolini. But still, a point is that's going to do it for the actual recap of the Thursday matches. Now it's time to get into the actual preview of the Friday matches. But before we get into any of that, going to have a quick word from our sponsor. We're brought to you by Game Time. I don't know about all of you, but I personally love attending sport events in person, and it used to be very annoying to actually find a ticketing platform that I could trust, but that changed once I found Game Time, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They have a lot of great features on the app, including my favorite feature, which is the images of seat views, which is very useful because I'm sure we've all been there before. You bought a ticket, you thought you were going to get a nice view of the action, and then you realize there's an obstruction, a pole, something in your way, and you realize that you just paid money for an event that you could barely see based on the seats that you got. That will not happen with Game Time, because with this feature, you're able to see a preview of the view you would be getting if you ended up purchasing that seat. So you end up knowing exactly what view you're going to get before spending your hard-earned money. It's also worth mentioning that Game Time is the place for last-minute ticket deals. Forget plenty of months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, theater, comedy, and more. And the Game Time guarantee also means you'll get the best price available every single time, because if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So snag tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code SGPN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code SGPN for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy has a weighted alongside your fantasy players all season long. NBA, NHL, soccer, and college basketball. Simply pick higher or lower on your favorite players' fantasy stats and cash in. And SGPN is currently teaming up with Underdog to give you even more of a bonus. Sign up between now and the end of the month, and 5 winners will receive an Underdog hat, an Underdog shirt, and a $50 SGPN gift card. Sign up today using promo code SGPN, and then go to sportsgamepockets.com/dog to enter the contest for your chance to win. And when you sign up with the promo code SGPN, Underdog will double your first deposit to $200. So Underdog Fantasy, promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping what happened on Thursday in the 3 tournaments. Now it's time to get into the actual preview for the matches on Friday in both Doha and Rio. Going to start off in Doha based on just the overall clock and the time that these matches start. So to look at the actual first match on the schedule in Doha, we're going to look at the matchup between Khachanov and Popyrin. I'll look at the actual odds here. Khachanov's a pretty decent favorite here at -255, and Popyrin is around +215 the other way. The over-under set at around 22.5 or 23. I actually see 22.5, so I'm going to quickly adjust that for a second. But I see 22.5. The over is about -120. The under is around even money. The game spread, you have Khachanov between 2.5 and 3.5. 2.5 is -150, 3.5 is +110. So the spread's basically 3, and Popyrin +3.5 is -130. For the sake of the actual set wagering, you can find Khachanov in straight sets at +110. Popyrin to win a set is -140. Over under 2.5 sets, the over is +135. The under is -165. Now the head-to-head has been pretty competitive between these players, as you've seen a couple of marathon matches. Now, Khachanov's gotten the better of most of these matches as he is 2-1 in the head-to-head. Last meeting was pretty straightforward, though. Faced off last year in Tokyo, and Popyrin actually ended up burying Khachanov 6-4, 6-2. But Khachanov won the first 2 matches in Rotterdam in 3 back in 2022, and he won in Dubai in 3 sets as well. So based on the actual head-to-head, Popyrin has a decent shot to actually win this thing or at least make it competitive. I'm going to lean to Khachanov. I just think he's the better player, and he's really had no issues in this event so far. Popyrin was pushed to the brink in the first round by Shelby, which you could argue is just a matter of the guy adjusting to the actual court itself. But you're looking at the last couple of matches, went to 3 sets against Grenier, ended up beating Bublik. We know Bublik's a bit of a head case at times, but Bublik has been pretty good this season, so still a solid win there for Popyrin. But 3 sets against Shelby and Grenier, not exactly ideal. Khachanov has been coasting, though. Won in straight sets against Morozin and played 3 games against Rusevori. And his only loss recently was against Dimitrov in a final set breaker. Beat Zhang 6-4, 6-1, beat Batista Agut in Marseille. Agut's washed, but still. Point is, I do think that Khachanov's in better form, so I am going to lean to Khachanov to win the match. The issue is the actual price. It feels a bit steep to me. I think Popyrin should be closer, in my opinion, to +160, +170. So I think the value might be on Popyrin here. I would not mind the actual games in favor of Popyrin +3.5. I can see a longer match taking place. I like the over at 22.5 games personally at -120. I can see a breaker. I can see a potential 3-setter. I don't mind the over 2.5 sets at +135. I expect a close match, and I do think that I'm going to lean to Khachanov to get it done. But when you're looking at the head-to-head, and each of Khachanov's 2 wins are in 3 sets, and Popyrin's the most recent winner, and that was a comfortable win in Tokyo, and he's a north of +200 underdog, I got to be tempted by the dog here at that price. So I'm going to lean to Popyrin based on the odds, and I am going to lean to the over as well in this match. But I do think Khachanov will eventually find a way to win a marathon, and I'm picking him to win the match on the money line. Not going to bet it, though, obviously, at -255. I don't even want to give it out as like a parlay piece because I think these odds are just wrong. So I'm going to lean to Popyrin plus the games at +3.5. Moving on to the next match, you have a surprising matchup here for the semis. You have Monfils taking on Mensik. Monfils has been fantastic in this event as he was able to destroy Humbert in the Thursday match. Mensik, though, has been really good as well as he ended up beating Rublev in straight sets. Had the marathon match against Murray, which he should have won comfortably in the 3rd set as he was up a double break at 5-2. Punted it away entirely and eventually won in a breaker. So it could have been worse. At least he won the match, but that would have been a really bad choke job as well. Point is, though, Monfils is a slight favorite here, -135, and Mensik is around +115. The over-under for games is set at 22.5 as well. As for the game spread, you have Monfils -1.5 at -105, Mensik plus 1.5 at minus 115. You can find the over 2.5 sets at plus 130. You can find Monfils in straight sets at plus 175. Mensik in straight sets at plus 250. Now, for the sake of this matchup, I do think Monfils has looked like the better player, but it's been very close. Monfils has actually been in good form. I know that I was kind of writing off some of the older guys. Gasquet won a match in this event. Congratulations, for example. Murray won a match. Congratulations. They lost immediately in the next round against an opponent that's actually just solid. So I'm not going to read much into it. Gasquet's win against Shevchenko, though, was pretty good. But still, point is there are a couple of older guys, a Gudel add to the list, who I just think are totally cooked. Monfils not totally cooked. I might have been overselling it a bit. He's still well past his prime, don't get me wrong, but he has these flashes and these random tournaments where he can show some life, and this is one of them. He's been really good. Now, Monfils, to go through his actual path here, beat Dzanchulp in straight sets, beat Zhang, who's in great form in the first match especially, as he killed Musetti, and he ended up seeing Monfils beat him in 3, and he beat Humbert, who's been in the best form of his career, and he won that one 6-2, 6-4. So Monfils look good. As for Mensik, beat Fekina in straight sets, beat Murray in 3, and beat Rublev, in straight sets. So both guys have been good. I really think that the side is not a great option. I'm going to lean Monfils to win, but I really don't see much edge on either side. So I guess I'm leaning to Mensik based on a coin flip in my eyes, but plus 115, not exactly thrilled with it. I prefer the over in this match. I see a close matchup. It's worth mentioning that Mensik's been a tiebreaker machine. There have been some breakers that involve some breaks of serve, so it's not like an actual hold fest. But Mensik has gone to a breaker in 4 of his last 5 sets. So I do think you're looking at what should be a bit of a marathon, maybe a breaker or two. 22.5 games, though, does feel a bit low for what should be a very even affair. Give me the over as a result. I'll link to the over in sets as well at plus 130. Don't mind the player prop team total there. If you want to go for the over 12.5 with either Monfils or Mensik, maybe both get there, but I think 12.5 is a little bit low. So I am going to lean to the over in that prop market as well. Moving on to Rio, though, we are going to look at the first matchup between Cerundolo and Vlahovic. Cerundolo is a minus 161 favorite, as Vlahovic is around plus 141. I actually see these lines shifting a bit, so I'm going to quickly adjust that. But money has come in on Vlahovic, as Cerundolo is now down to minus 150, and I believe Vlahovic is now at plus 130, so I'm quickly just adjusting that right now. Also, the totals moved, so let me just quickly fix that. So Cerundolo is still a favorite. He's not as big of a favorite as he was about an hour ago. But Cerundolo is still minus 150. Vlahovic plus 130. Over under 22.5 games. The under is minus 120. The over is even money. As to the game spread, you can find between 1.5 and 2.5. The 1.5 for Cerundolo minus the 1.5 is minus 130. Plus 1.5 for Vlahovic is even money. If you want to go for the 2.5, you can find minus 2.5 at minus 105. Plus 2.5 at a minus 115. If you want to find the set wagering, over 2.5 sets is plus 130. Under is minus 160. Cerundolo in straight sets is plus 160. Vlahovic in straight sets is a plus 275. Now, for the actual head-to-head between these players, didn't mention in the last event for Monfils because they is never faced off against Mensik. But for the head-to-head here, they faced off one time. Vlahovic did beat Cerundolo in Cincinnati last year. Does it mean anything? Not really, because that was on hard court, but Vlahovic is not exactly known for being a great hard court player, so maybe that matters. But the point is, Cerundolo was in really bad form to start the year, and he was in really underwhelming form in the first round because he had a bit of a struggle there as he won in 3 sets, but he ended up alternating 6-1s in the first round against an opponent he was a massive favorite against. But then he found his groove again in that third set, winning 6-2. Carried over into the second round as he destroyed Ramos Vinolas as he won 6-2, 6-1. So it appears that Cerundolo might have regained his form to some degree. At least he's not as bad as he was in the first month or so of the season. But Vlahovic has been solid. We saw him make a pretty respectable run a couple of actually last tournament against in Buenos Aires, ended up beating Fees in straight sets, beat Tabilo, lost to the eventual champion, Diaz Acosta. But we know Vlahovic is a solid clay player. Then showed up for Rio, ended up beating Galan in 3 sets, and beat Degir in straight sets. So Vlahovic is in good form, and Cerundolo has been streaky, but still has looked better recently compared to the last month or so. I understand why Cerundolo is favored here. Do I want to lay 150? Not really. I think 150 is a bit steep. I think that Cerundolo, I need to see a bigger sample of him playing good tennis. He's played 3 really good sets in a row. it's a start. I got to see more before I lay 150 against a proven ATP clay player. I'm going to lean to Lajovic plus the games here are 2.5. I am going to lean to the over, though. I can see this going 3 sets. I mentioned before that Lajovic did go to 3 sets against Galan in the first round, did have a 7-5 against Desir in the second round. So I can see a bit of a marathon here. So I am going to lean to the over, and I am going to lean to the dog here. Minus 150, just a little bit steep for Cerundolo. Once again, if he wins, would I be shocked? No, because I think that when both players are on, I think Cerundolo's better. But 150 is too steep for a pretty volatile player. Give me the more consistent option at plus 130. I'm going to lean to the over as well. Moving on to the next match, you have Baez against Montero. So Baez is a minus 222 favorite. Montero is plus 175. Over-under set at 22.5. This line I found in Europe, so I didn't actually have any other like set wagering props. I think I might have seen like plus 115 for the set wagering for Baez and straight sets, but nothing really that tangible that I could use. So I'm just going to stick with these lines. And we'll go from there. Baez is 3-1 in the head-to-head, but the matches have been competitive. So Baez did win the last meeting in Santiago in 2022, as Baez 1-3. They faced off in Rio, so this exact event 2 years ago, and Montero did win in 3 despite losing the first set 6-1. Faced off in Brazil in 2021 as well, different event, and Baez won that one in straight sets. And they faced off in Buenos Aires in 2021. Baez won in straight sets with a bagel in the second set. So the point is Montero has been pretty fortunate for his first couple of rounds because he was supposed to lose to Alcaraz in the first round. I don't think any of us were going to pick him to win that match. Alcaraz got injured in the middle of the first game and ended up retiring midway through the third game. So Montero was supposed to get his ass kicked, ended up getting a miracle draw to advance to the second round. Made the most of it, beat Alves, who I don't think is that great of a player in general. So pretty easy path for Montero so far. As for Baez, he's been really solid. Beat Mutet in straight sets 6-4, 6-3, and beat Diaz Acosta in straight sets. I know fatigue might have been an issue for Diaz Acosta, but he ended up looking pretty sharp after a slow start against Wawrinka in the first round, as he eventually won that in straight sets. So Baez in better form. I think he's the better clay player. The issue is the fact that there's home court advantage and the fact that Montero has really given Baez problems in the past, where Baez has won 3 of the 4, but the last meeting went to 3 sets. They faced off one time in this event, and Montero won in 3. I do think, though, Baez is the better player by a pretty substantial margin, just based on watching them play over the years. I am going to lean to Baez in straight sets. I don't feel great about it. It might come down to the wire, but I do think that Baez, the value for me is on the straight sets. I don't see much else. I don't have odds on the over 2.5 sets. Do I want to take it? Not really, because Baez has looked really sharp so far in this event. He even looked pretty sharp in Buenos Aires. The issue was he completely no-showed one match against Coria. But overall, he's been pretty decent recently, and Montero's been fine, I guess. I mean, he lost in the second round to Vavasori in Buenos Aires, had a decent showing in the Davis Cup, but I do think looking at this overall matchup here, Baez is better. I can get the better player plus money to win in straight sets. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to link to Baez in straight sets at around plus 110, plus 115. Moving on to the last match of the show, we have Norrie taking on Seaboth Wild. You have Norrie at around minus 261, and you have Seaboth Wild at around plus 216. As for the actual, I actually have lines now for Baez set wagering. It is plus 115. So once again, that's going to be my main lean there. If you want the over 2.5 sets, you can find that at plus 140. Moving on, though, to the next match, you have a matchup between Norrie and Seaboth Wild. It actually is not the last match. I forgot that I do not have lines on the Fonseca match. But either way, point is, Norrie is a pretty decent favorite here for the actual game spread. Norrie is minus 3.5 at minus 110. Seaboth Wild's plus 3.5 at minus 110 as well. Over-under for games, over 22.5 is even money. Under is minus 120. As for the set wagering, you can find Norrie in straight sets at plus 105. You can find Seaboth Wild to an ace set at minus 135. And you can find the over 2.5 sets at plus 145. So simply put, for this matchup, no head-to-head information. Seaboth Wild was in really bad form for a while and then found his groove in this event because he ended up having to come back and beat Tabilo in the first round, and he ended up doing so, then went to 3 against Munar. They finished that match on Thursday after it started the day prior and had to be suspended. But the point is, gone to 3 sets in each of the first 2 rounds against decent competition, Dabilo's okay. Munar's fine on clay. I think that Nori's better, obviously. Nori has been cruising. I think he's looked like the best player here by a pretty substantial margin. Beat Delian 6-3, 6-2. They had a 3-set marathon here last year, and Nori beat him more comfortably in this one, and then beat Barrios Vera 6-1, 6-1. I'm going to lean to Nori in straight sets here at plus 105. I know Seaboth Wild has the home country advantage with the fans. I get it. But Nori's been really, really good. And I think that he's been the best player here. Seaboth Wild is fine. But when you go to 3 sets constantly, and now you have a step up in competition, I am a bit concerned. And I think plus 105 is a good way to reduce the juice on the minus 261 favorite. So give me Nori to win in straight sets here, defending champion. So I know that he could handle the actual environment, whether the crowd's with him or against him. And he's been really solid on this court. So give me Nori in straight sets at plus 105 as my main lean for this match. Moving on to the last match, I have no lines whatsoever. You have Fonseca taking on Navoni, which should be a very fun matchup because they are two very solid young up-and-comers on clay. And they faced off one time before, faced off in Brazil, different event in 2022. And Fonseca did win in 3 with a final set breaker. So expect to see some fireworks and some really competitive tennis because Fonseca's been really good. As I mentioned before, he has not dropped a set yet. Beat Fees in straight sets and beat Green in straight sets. You're looking at Navona, though. He's been great, too. Ended up going through qualifying. Beat Alvin in straight sets. Beat Olivieri in straight sets. Ended up beating Coria in 3. Good win there. Ended up beating Hanfman 6-1, 6-2. Fonseca might be a bit of a favorite here. I'm assuming he will be based on the crowd and the hype, so I think he might be a slight favorite. It might be minus 110 apiece, but with the head-to-head advantage, I probably would assume the line's going to be Fonseca minus 120, give or take. Navone's been really good, though. I think I'm going to link to the over in this one with the sets. I see a war. Once again, they faced off in the first meeting back in 2022. Yes, I know that was over a year ago, but still went to 3 sets. Both guys have been very comfortable with this court, and I do think that the firepower for both guys should be on full display. Give me a nice, long, competitive match between 2 up-and-comers. Give me the over as my main lean for this match. I'm going to lean to Fonseca based on the crowd and just the overall upside with his game. But I do think that Navona is not going to go quietly, and I do think he's in line to put together a good showing here. So I am going to lean to the over as my main play in that match. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the actual previews of those 6 matches, since we are skipping Los Cabos. Now it is time for the Lock and Dog picks. But before we do that, I can have a quick word from our sponsor. We're brought to you by Hall of Fame Bets. Win bigger by betting smarter NBA season with Hall of Fame Bets. Sports betting analytics platform for parlays, player props, and game lines. Research every NBA and soccer bet with historical stats and data. Enter any parlay data, and Hall of Fame Bets is a revolutionary prop optimizer tool to get hit rates broken down by leg, as well as an expected probability for the entire parlay. Sort all players by hit rate for any bet to learn which players are hot and which picks have value. Stop betting in the dark and join over 30,000 users researching with Hall of Fame Bets to craft more intelligent, data-driven parlays. Download the Hall of Fame Bets app for HOPENY.com. Use code SGPN to get 50% off your first month today. Start researching, start winning with Hall of Fame Bets. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping the matches from Thursday and then previewing the matches for Friday in Doha and in Rio. Now it is time for the Lock and Dog pick. Starting off with the lock, I am going to go back to Doha. I'm going to look at the later match between Mensik and Monfils. I am going to go with the over 22.5 games at minus 110 as my lock. Simply put, Monfils is a slight favorite here at minus 135, but the matchup is very close based on the odds. And I think it should be a coin flip. Both guys have been in very good form. Monfils ended up taking Sinner to 3 sets in the last event in Rotterdam, ended up going to 3 against Zhang. We know that he has been in great form recently, and I do think that Monfils, with his serve being up and down, might struggle to hold regularly in some spots here, but I expect him to be a little bit inconsistent. Mensik the same way. We've seen him get broken, but the firepower should be able to help him be aggressive and to take charge in a lot of points. So a bit of a conflicting style there between the two of them, which should result in a nice long match. Plus, I mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. 4 of Mensik's last 5 sets have gone to tiebreakers, so you have seen a lot of long sets. You win this with a 7-6, 6-4, maybe a couple breakers, or maybe it goes 3, and you basically win automatically. But with the amount of long sets Mensik's had recently, I see a couple long sets here, so I am going to assume you'll get maybe 1 breaker in this match. Plus 4 Monfils, the last 6 matches have gone over this number, so the line feels too short to me. Give me the over 22.5 games as my lock in the Mensik and Monfils match. For the dog, I am going to go back to Rio. I am going to go to the Norrie Magic and Seabold Wild. Give me Norrie to win in straight sets at plus 105. Norrie has not only won every set here, he has not dropped more than 3 games in a set yet. He has been destroying people. And I do think that Seabold Wild, who should look a little bit energized in front of the crowd, he's played a lot of tennis with the 3-set marathons he's had. But I simply put think that Norrie is a massive step up in competition. He ended up going to 3 sets in each of the first 2 rounds. Norrie's defending champion. He's been very comfortable in Rio in years past, and I do think that Seabold Wild will eventually lose this one in a competitive straight sets, maybe a 6-4, 6-4. But Norrie's consistency on this court has been on full display. He looks like the sharpest player here by a pretty decent margin, and I think Seabold Wild is, once again, it's good to see him get back on track, but still, I think there's still a talent gap, and I am going to go with Norrie at a pretty good price here at plus 105 to win in straight sets. So once again, my picks for the show, the lock is going to be on Mensik and Monfils over 22.5 games at minus 110, and the dog will be on Norrie to win in straight sets at plus 105. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. Find me on the NBA Gambling Podcast, the NFL Gambling Podcast, WNBA as well, a bunch of shows, the network, MLB as well. We're going to be doing some division previews coming up soon, so MLB will be back in full display. Besides that, though, I was aware I kind of messed up the actual schedule for the show this past week because I forgot that Doha does everything a day early. So back once again tomorrow for the Doha final and the semis in Rio. So back once again tomorrow. But until next time, a reminder to like and subscribe and to rate and review the podcast on either Apple or Spotify. And a reminder to check out the merch store to buy some merch for the show. Until tomorrow, though, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.